I raised my daughter alone. For 28 years I was her mother, her father, her protector, and sometimes when life became especially difficult, the person who had to pretend that everything was going to be okay, even when I had no idea how I was going to make it through the next day. I never expected anyone to thank me. I never raised my daughter because I wanted praise. I did it because she was mine. Because the moment I held her in my arms for the first time, I made a promise to myself. No matter what happened in life, I would never let her feel alone. I kept that promise through years of sleepless nights, difficult decisions, unpaid bills, and countless sacrifices that nobody ever saw. But on the day of my daughter's wedding, standing among nearly 400 guests, I suddenly found myself wishing I had never come. The man standing on the stage was my daughter's new father-in-law. His name was Richard. He was wealthy, respected, and used to getting exactly what he wanted. From the moment I met him, I knew he looked at me differently. Not with curiosity, not with kindness, with judgment. I was wearing a simple navy blue dress that day. It wasn't expensive. It wasn't covered in diamonds. It was the nicest dress I could afford. And I had carefully chosen it because I wanted to look presentable for my daughter's special day. I remember standing near the entrance of the wedding hall, watching my daughter walk toward the stage. Her name was Emily, and she looked beautiful. For a moment I forgot everything. I forgot every difficult year. I forgot every night I had cried silently so she wouldn't hear me. I forgot all the times I had wondered whether I was doing enough. All I could see was my little girl. The same girl who once held my finger while learning to walk. The same girl who used to climb into my bed after having a nightmare. The same girl who once told me, when she was only 7 years old, that I was the strongest woman in the world. And now she was standing there in a white wedding dress. A grown woman. A bride. My daughter. I couldn't stop the tears from coming. But I wasn't sad. Those were tears of pride. I looked at her and thought, we made it. Just the two of us. We made it. After the ceremony, the guests gathered for dinner and speeches. Everything seemed perfect. People were laughing. Music was playing. Emily and her husband, Daniel, were sitting at the head table. I was seated several tables away. I didn't mind. I wasn't there for attention. I was there for my daughter. Then Richard stood up. He tapped his glass with a spoon. The room gradually became quiet. Everyone, he said, smiling. I'd like to say a few words. People applauded. I smiled politely. I thought he was going to welcome me into the family. Maybe say something kind about the bride. Maybe thank everyone for coming. I had no idea what was about to happen. Richard looked toward Emily. Then he looked directly at me. And his smile disappeared. I think he began that today is a good day to talk about family. Something in his voice made my stomach tighten. I didn't know why. He continued. Family isn't just about raising a child. It's about giving them the right values. The room became strangely quiet. I glanced at Emily. She was still smiling, but I could see confusion in her eyes. Richard continued. Sometimes children grow up hearing only one side of a story. I felt my heart stop for a second. I knew exactly what he was talking about. Emily's father. Her biological father had left when she was only 3 years old. He had disappeared from our lives. For years I had protected Emily from the details. I never told her all the terrible things he had done. I never filled her head with hatred. When she asked where her father was, I simply told her that sometimes adults make choices that hurt the people they love. That was all. I never wanted my daughter to grow up believing that she was unwanted. But apparently, Richard had heard a very different version of the story. He raised his glass. Some people, he said, spend years pretending to be victims. My face went cold. A few guests exchanged uncomfortable looks. I wanted to disappear. But Richard wasn't finished. Some people tell everyone that they raised their children alone because they were abandoned. He paused. Then he looked directly at me. But perhaps the truth is that they drove everyone away. The room went completely silent. I couldn't breathe. I stared at him. I couldn't believe what I had just heard. He was accusing me. In front of my daughter's new family. In front of 400 guests. On my daughter's wedding day. And the worst part wasn't what he said. The worst part was that he said it with such confidence. As if he knew my life. As if he had been there. As if he had lived every night I spent worrying about my daughter. as if he had held her when she was sick, as if he had sat beside her hospital bed, as if he had worked 2 jobs to pay for her school, as if he had cried alone in a bathroom because there wasn't enough money to pay the bills. He knew none of that, but he had decided he knew me. Richard continued. I've heard stories about this family. My hands began to shake. I've heard that Emily's father wasn't the villain everyone made him out to be. That sentence hit me harder than anything else, because it wasn't true. But I didn't want to argue. Not there. Not at my daughter's wedding. I slowly stood up. I thought about leaving. I thought about walking out of that room and never looking back. Maybe that would have been easier. Maybe I could have protected my dignity by leaving quietly. But before I could move, I heard a chair scrape against the floor. Emily stood up. Everyone turned toward her. Her face had changed. The smile was gone. The happiness was gone. My daughter was looking at her father-in-law with an expression I had never seen before. She was angry. Not the kind of anger that comes and goes. This was different. This was the anger of someone who had just heard a lie about the person they loved most. Stop. Her voice wasn't loud, but it echoed through the entire hall. Richard looked surprised. Emily. No. She raised her hand. Don't say my name. The room became completely silent. Daniel stood up too. Emily, what's going on? She turned toward him. Your father is insulting my mother. Richard laughed nervously. That's not what I was doing. Emily looked at him. Then what were you doing? He didn't answer. She took a deep breath. Then she walked away from the head table. Toward me. I whispered, Emily. Please. I didn't want this. I didn't want her wedding to become a battlefield. But she took my hand. The same hand that had held hers when she was a little girl. The same hand that had wiped her tears. The same hand that had worked until it was tired. And she squeezed it. Then she turned toward the crowd. My mother doesn't owe anyone an explanation. Richard stood there, stunned. Emily continued. But since you decided to publicly accuse her of something she didn't do, I think everyone deserves to hear the truth. My heart began pounding. Emily, you don't have to do this. She looked at me. Mom, yes, I do. There were tears in her eyes. But she didn't look away. Then she faced the guests. When I was 3 years old, my father left. Nobody moved. Not because my mother drove him away. Emily's voice trembled. He left because he chose to. Richard opened his mouth. But Emily stopped him. You don't get to interrupt me. That was the moment I realized something. My little girl was gone. The child I had spent 28 years protecting had become a woman who was ready to protect me. Emily reached into her purse. She pulled out a small envelope. I recognized it immediately. My old photographs. Years ago, I had given them to her. Pictures of her childhood. Pictures I thought she had forgotten. She held one up. This is my mother and me when I was 5. Then another. Here we are when I was 8. Another. When I was 12. She looked at the crowd. Do you know where my father was during these years? Nobody answered. He wasn't here. Her voice cracked. He wasn't at my school plays. He wasn't at my birthdays. He wasn't beside my hospital bed when I had pneumonia. He wasn't there when I needed help with homework. He wasn't there when I cried because kids at school made fun of me. She looked at me. My mother was. I started crying. I couldn't help it. Emily continued. When I was 16, I wanted to quit school because I thought we couldn't afford it. She smiled through her tears. My mother secretly worked extra hours so I could stay. She looked at Richard. So no, she didn't drive my father away. She spent her entire life trying to make sure I never felt abandoned by him. Richard's face had turned pale. But Emily wasn't finished. You said my mother pretended to be a victim. She took a breath. Let me tell you what I know. The entire room was listening. My mother never told me to hate my father. That surprised me. She never taught me to blame him. She never filled my head with lies. She protected me from the truth because she wanted me to have a childhood. I covered my mouth. I had never known Emily understood all of this. She turned toward the guest. When I was 19, my father suddenly contacted me. My heart sank. I remembered that day. Her father had called after 16 years. He wanted money. He said he had changed. He wanted to meet his daughter. I had told Emily that the choice was hers. If she wanted to meet him, I would support her. If she didn't, I would support her. I never made the decision for her. Emily looked at me. My mother told me I could see him if I wanted. She paused. She even drove me to meet him. The room was silent. I was terrified. Emily's eyes filled with tears. But my mother waited outside. She smiled sadly. She waited for 3 hours. I remembered that day. I remembered sitting in the car, waiting, wondering if my daughter would come back angry, wondering if she would finally understand why her father had left. When Emily finally returned, she was crying. She didn't say much. She simply hugged me. And I knew. She had seen enough. Emily turned back to Richard. You don't know my mother. Her voice became stronger. You know rumors. You know a story someone else told you. But I know the truth. She pointed toward me. I lived it. Richard looked down. No one in the room was smiling anymore. The wedding had completely changed. But then something unexpected happened. Daniel walked toward us. He stood beside Emily. Then he turned to his father. Dad. Richard looked at him. Apologize. Richard's face tightened. What? Daniel repeated himself. Apologize to her. Richard looked around the room. Daniel, this is a family matter. No. Daniel shook his head. She is family. Then he looked at me. Mrs. Carter, I'm sorry. I was stunned. He continued. I should have known better than to believe something without hearing the truth. I didn't know what to say. Then Daniel turned to Emily. And I'm sorry that your wedding day became this. Emily nodded. She was still holding my hand. Richard remained silent. For a moment I thought the night would end there. But then an elderly woman stood up from one of the tables. I recognized her. She was Richard's mother. Daniel's grandmother. Her name was Margaret. She slowly walked toward the stage. Everyone watched her. She looked at Richard. Then she said something that shocked everyone. Richard. He turned toward her. Enough. His face changed. Mom. Margaret looked at me. Then she walked toward me. I'm sorry. I didn't understand. She took my hand. Years ago, I met your daughter's father. I froze. What? Margaret nodded. I knew him. Richard looked at his mother. Mom, don't. But she continued. He told me himself that he was leaving. The entire room gasped. I couldn't move. Margaret looked at Emily. Your father wasn't forced out. He wasn't abandoned. He left. Richard looked furious. Mom, this isn't the time. Margaret's voice became firm. It is exactly the time. She looked at me. I should have told the truth years ago. My eyes filled with tears. Why didn't you? She looked down. As I was ashamed. She explained that after Emily's father left, he had contacted her. He had asked her to keep his whereabouts secret. He didn't want responsibility. He wanted to start over. And she had agreed to keep quiet. I thought I was protecting my son, she said. But I was wrong. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. All those years. All those questions. All those moments when people wondered why I was raising my daughter alone. The truth had been known by someone else. Margaret looked at Richard. Your father abandoned his responsibilities. Richard's face was pale. And now you've repeated his mistake. Nobody spoke. Then Margaret turned to me. I'm sorry that you had to carry this alone. For the first time that evening, I felt something inside me begin to heal. Not because Richard apologized. Not because the guests knew the truth. But because after all these years, someone finally said the words I had needed to hear. You didn't do anything wrong. I looked at Emily. She was crying. I pulled her into my arms. And in that moment, I wasn't thinking about the wedding. I wasn't thinking about Richard. I wasn't thinking about the 400 guests. I was thinking about the little girl who had once asked me if I would always be there. And I realized that I had kept my promise. But there was one more surprise waiting. Emily stepped back from me. She wiped her tears. Then she smiled. Mom. I looked at her. What? She took a small box from her purse. I stared at it. What is that? She opened it. Inside was a simple gold necklace. I had seen it before. It was the necklace my own mother had given me when I was young. I thought I had lost it years ago. I looked at Emily in disbelief. Where did you get that? She smiled. I found it in an old box. I couldn't speak. She took the necklace out. Grandma gave this to you when you were 21. I nodded. Yes. And you wore it the day I was born. I touched my chest. I remembered. How did you? You told me the story once. She placed the necklace in my hand. Mom, you spent my entire life giving me everything you had. Tonight I want to give you something. I shook my head. Emily, you don't have to. She smiled. I know. Then she turned toward the crowd. My mother spent 28 years raising me. She gave up opportunities. She gave up relationships. She gave up sleep. She gave up so many things. But she never once made me feel like I was a burden. She looked at me. That's the woman I call my mother. Then she turned toward her new husband, Daniel. He stepped forward. Emily took his hand. I chose to marry you because I believe you are different. Daniel nodded. But I need you to understand something. She looked at him seriously. If someone disrespects my mother, they disrespect me. Daniel looked at me. Then he smiled. Then I promised to always respect her. The guests began applauding. Slowly at first. Then louder. I looked around the room. 400 people. 400 witnesses. But suddenly, I didn't feel humiliated anymore. I felt proud. Not because my daughter had defended me, but because she had grown into a woman who knew the difference between silence and dignity. The wedding continued. It wasn't perfect anymore, but somehow it became more meaningful. Later that night, after most of the guests had left, I found Emily sitting alone outside the hall. I sat beside her. For a few moments, neither of us spoke. Then I said, "You shouldn't have had to defend me." She looked at me. "Why not?" "Because I'm your mother." She smiled. "And I'm your daughter." I laughed through my tears. "I spent my whole life protecting you." She rested her head on my shoulder. "I know." Then tonight it was my turn. I looked at her. "You didn't have to." "I wanted to." And that's when I realized something. A mother spends years teaching her child how to stand. But one day, if you're lucky, that child grows up and becomes the person who helps you stand when you need it most. I thought about all the years I had spent believing that my sacrifices were invisible. Maybe they were. Maybe nobody had seen the late nights. Maybe nobody had seen the difficult choices. Maybe nobody knew how many times I had cried alone. But my daughter knew. She had seen everything. And that was enough. Before we left, Richard approached me. I wasn't expecting it. He stopped a few feet away. For the first time. He looked nervous. "I'm sorry," he said. I didn't answer immediately. He continued. "I believed what I was told." I looked at him. "You believed it because it was easier than getting to know me." He lowered his eyes. "You're right." I took a breath. "I accept your apology." His eyes lifted. "But I won't forget what happened." He nodded. "I understand." Then he walked away. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need to embarrass him in front of everyone. I didn't need to make him suffer. Because my daughter had already given me something much more valuable. She had given me back my dignity. As we drove home that night, Emily sat beside me. She was still wearing her wedding dress. Her husband was driving. The city lights passed by the windows. I looked at my daughter. "Are you happy?" She smiled. "Yes. Even after everything?" She reached for my hand. "Especially after everything." I smiled. Then she said something I'll never forget. "Mom, I know you think you raised me alone." I looked at her. "But you didn't." I frowned. "What do you mean?" She smiled. "You raised me. But I grew up carrying you in my heart." I felt tears running down my face. She continued. "So maybe you thought you were alone. But you were never really alone." I looked out the window. For 28 years I had believed my story was about surviving. I was wrong. It was about love. It was about a mother who refused to give up. It was about a daughter who never forgot. And it was about the moment when a woman who had spent her entire life protecting her child finally discovered that her child had been protecting her heart all along. That night I went home and placed the old necklace around my neck. I stood in front of the mirror. For the first time in years, I didn't see the tired woman who had struggled through life. I saw a mother who had done her best, a mother who had made mistakes, a mother who had survived, and a mother whose daughter had stood before 400 people and said, That's my mother. And somehow those 3 words were worth more to me than anything money could ever buy. Because people may forget the decorations at a wedding. They may forget the food. They may forget the music. They may even forget the speeches. But I will never forget the moment my daughter stood up. Not to ruin her wedding. Not to start a fight. Not to seek revenge. She stood up because someone had attacked the character of the woman who had given her everything. And she chose to tell the truth. Sometimes the greatest gift a child can give a parent isn't money. It isn't success. It isn't even a perfect life. Sometimes it's simply this. Mom, I see everything you did for me. And that night, my daughter gave me exactly that. She saw me. She remembered. And after 28 years of wondering whether my sacrifices had mattered, I finally knew the answer. They had. Because the little girl I raised alone had grown into a woman who stood beside me when the whole world was watching. And in the end, that was the greatest proof that I had never truly failed. I had raised my daughter. And somehow she had raised my heart too.